Security was already reaching for Marcus Reed's arm when Edward Whitmore said his name. "Not sir. Not you there." His full name. Marcus Reed. The laughter around the Whitmore garden party died so fast that even the champagne glasses seemed to stop clinking. Marcus stood in a faded navy jacket between white linen tables, silver trays, and men in tuxedos who had spent the last 5 minutes asking whether he had wandered in from the delivery entrance. Grant Vale smirked beside the floral arch Claire Whitmore, in a red dress bright enough to command the whole lawn, stared as her father crossed the grass and reached for Marcus's hand. When their palms met, the cracked face of an old military watch slipped from beneath Marcus's sleeve. Claire saw it. Grant saw it. The guests saw it. And someone behind her whispered exactly what everyone was thinking. "You know him?" Marcus did not pull away. He did not explain. He only looked at the billionaire like a man trying to keep a locked door closed inside his chest. At home, 8-year-old Lily Reed was waiting for his call before her evening medicine. His supervisor had already warned him that one more late delivery could cost him the route that paid for her cardiology visits. And now, in front of half of Boston's wealthiest owners, Marcus had been called a trespasser without anyone asking why he was there. Before this story goes any further, ask yourself this. If a room decided who you were before you open your mouth, would you still do the right thing? Drop where you're watching from and stay with this story, because what Edward Whitmore said next was not something that party was ready to hear. Marcus had arrived less than 12 minutes earlier with a sealed medical courier envelope pressed beneath his jacket. The Whitmore Foundation paid extra for after-hours deliveries, and Marcus had taken the job because Lily's prescription refill was sitting unpaid at a pharmacy counter across town. His old truck had coughed up the private road, past stone pillars, clipped hedges, and black cars shining under warm garden lights. He checked the address twice on his cracked phone before stepping through the service gate, careful not to brush the white roses that cost more than his weekly groceries. Then he saw her. An elderly woman near the side walkway had slipped beside a marble step, one gloved hand trembling over a spilled glass. Guest looked over, then looked away. Marcus set the envelope against his chest, crossed the path, and helped her sit upright before the waitstaff even moved. That was why he entered the main lawn from the wrong angle. That was why Grant noticed the worn cuffs, the work boots, the delivery badge clipped low on his belt. "This is a private engagement party," Grant said, loud enough to invite an audience. "Staff use the rear." Marcus kept his voice even. "I have a delivery for the foundation office." Claire turned at the word foundation, guarded and polished, her eyes moving from his jacket to his boots, then to the watch on his wrist. For one small second, her face tightened. Then Grant stepped closer. "Search him." Marcus's phone buzzed. Lily's name lit the cracked screen. His thumb hovered, but security moved first. That was when Edward Whitmore came out from the veranda, saw the watch, saw Marcus, and stopped like the ground had shifted beneath him. "Let him go," Edward said. No one moved. So the billionaire walked into the silence, took Marcus's hand, and said the name again. "Marcus Reed." Claire's lips parted. Grant's smile vanished. And Edward, still holding the hand everyone else had tried to push away, said, "This man saved my life." The words, "this man saved my life," did not free Marcus Reed. They only made the room look at him harder. The old military watch stayed half visible beneath his sleeve, its cracked glass catching the garden lights like a secret trying not to be seen. Claire Whitmore's eyes remained on it, even after her father spoke, and Grant Vale's smile had folded into something colder. But before that hand clasp, before the red dress, before the whispered, "You know him?" Marcus had been in a kitchen barely wide enough for 2 people, folding a hospital bill in a thirds so Lily would not see the red stamp across the top. The apartment smelled like burned toast, children's shampoo, and coffee he had reheated twice but never finished. Lily sat at the small table in her school cardigan, swinging her feet above a floor where one tile near the sink had been cracked for 3 years. Her pill organizer was open beside a purple lunchbox. Monday through Sunday, morning and night. Marcus checked each tiny compartment the way other men checked locks before a storm. "Daddy," Lily said, watching his fingers brush the watch on his wrist, "why don't you get that fixed?" Marcus looked down. The face was scratched, the strap darkened by years of work, rain, sweat, and hospital waiting rooms. He could have told her it was worth nothing to a pawn shop and everything to a memory he had never explained. Instead, he fastened the buckle tighter. Some things don't have to look perfect to keep time. Lily considered that with the seriousness only an 8-year-old could give to a broken object. Then she tore a corner from her homework sheet, wrote something in purple marker, folded it twice, and slipped it into the pocket of his navy jacket when she thought he was not looking. He let her. That was their ritual. Notes for long nights. Notes for hard mornings. Notes for the moments when the world tried to tell him he was smaller than he was. His phone buzzed on the counter. A message from his supervisor. One late drop tonight, and the Whitmore route goes to someone else. Beneath it sat another reminder from the pharmacy. Prescription awaiting payment. Marcus turned the screen face down before Lily could read it. She noticed anyway. Children always did. "Is it my medicine?" she asked. Marcus rinsed the butter knife, dried it, and placed it gently beside the sink. "No panique. No performance. It's handled, baby." "That means no." He looked at her then, really looked. The worry around her eyes did not belong on a child's face. "It means I'm handling it." Lily slid from the chair and hugged him around the waist, careful of the courier badge clipped to his belt. "Don't let rich people scare you, Dad." Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. He did not know how she knew where the delivery was going. Maybe she had seen the address on his cracked phone. Maybe children heard the parts adults try to swallow. He kissed the top of her head and tucked the unpaid bill behind the toaster. "Being scared isn't the problem," he said. "Forgetting who you are is." 2 hours later, after leaving Lily with Mrs. Alvarez downstairs, Marcus climbed into his old truck with a sealed Whitmore Foundation envelope on the passenger seat and his daughter's note in his pocket. He was supposed to drop it at the Foundation office, sign the tablet, and get across town before Lily's evening dose. A simple delivery, a clean route, nothing more. But at the first red light, he unfolded the note. In crooked purple letters, Lily had written, "Come home the same man." Marcus pressed the paper flat against the steering wheel, then drove toward the gates of a world that had already decided men like him entered through the back. The gates of Whitmore Estate opened without a sound, and Marcus felt Lily's note in his jacket pocket like a small hand against his chest. Come home the same man. He was already 7 minutes behind schedule. His supervisor's warning sat unread on his cracked phone, and Lily's evening dose waited across town with a price tag he still had not covered. But the courier app flashed one instruction in cold blue letters, delivered directly to Foundation office. Signature required. The driveway curved past fountains lit from beneath, past imported cars lined like black mirrors, past a private lawn where music floated under strings of gold light. Marcus parked where the service sign pointed, killed the engine, and sat for one breath longer than he needed. Then he picked up the sealed envelope and stepped out. His boots made a dull sound on stone polished smooth enough to reflect chandeliers from inside the mansion. Waiters in white jackets moved faster than anyone in tuxedos, invisible unless a glass was empty. Marcus knew that kind of invisibility. He had worn it in hospitals, loading docks, and office towers after midnight. At the security table, a young guard looked at his badge, then at his jacket cuffs, then at the envelope. Deliveries go around back. Marcus lifted the phone with the route screen open. App says Foundation office. Signature required from a Whitmore representative. The guard's mouth tightened, not angry, just trained to doubt the wrong people quickly. Before he could answer, a sharp cry came from the lawn. An elderly woman had slipped near the side walkway, her pearl bracelet broken, tiny white beads rolling under the legs of passing guests. For half a second, everyone looked. Then everyone looked away, careful not to wrinkle their evening clothes with someone else's problem. Marcus moved before permission arrived. He set the envelope under his arm, crossed the edge of the lawn, and crouched beside her. "Ma'am, don't try to stand yet." His voice was low enough not to embarrass her. His fingers checked her wrist, then the angle of her ankle, calm and practiced in a way no delivery driver was supposed to be. The woman blinked at him through pain. "Are you with the medical staff?" Marcus shook his head. "No, ma'am. Just don't want you hurt worse." That was when Claire Whitmore saw him. She stood near the floral arch in a red dress, one hand around a champagne flute she had not touched. Her face was controlled, beautiful in the distant way marble was beautiful, but her eyes caught the way Marcus supported the woman's elbow without crowding her, the way he looked at the ankle before he looked at the audience. A small crease formed between Claire's brows. Then Grant Vale reached her side and ruined the moment. "Claire," he said, loud enough for nearby donors to hear, "your foundation's courier seems to be mingling." Marcus helped the woman onto a bench and stood. The old military watch slid from beneath his sleeve as he adjusted the envelope. Claire's eyes dropped to it. Just once. The cracked glass. The worn strap. Something in her expression flickered, then closed. Grant stepped closer, smiling with his teeth. "That watch doesn't look like it came from a courier route." Marcus held his gaze. "Neither does kindness, but people still find it when they need to." The smile thinned. A few guests laughed because Grant looked like the kind of man they were expected to laugh with. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Mrs. Alvarez. Probably Lily asking when he would call. He did not answer. Claire looked from the phone to the envelope. "You said this is for the foundation?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then hand it to security. I need a Whitmore signature." Grant's eyes sharpened. "Or you need an excuse to stay." The elderly woman on the bench tried to speak, but a waiter moved in front of her with a glass of water, blocking her from view. Marcus noticed that too. He noticed everything. The camera above the veranda. The second guard touching his earpiece. The way Claire's hand paused when the watch caught the light again. She did not believe him. Not yet. But she had seen something she could not place. Then Grant pointed at Marcus's wrist and said, "Before we sign anything, maybe someone should ask where he got that." Claire's champagne glass stopped halfway to the table, and Marcus felt the sealed envelope bend slightly under his fingers. "Before we sign anything, maybe someone should ask where he got that." Grant's voice landed softly, which made it worse. The guests closest to Marcus turned toward his wrist as if the cracked watch had become a weapon instead of a piece of old metal. Marcus lowered his sleeve without rushing. Too fast would look guilty. Too slow would look defiant. Claire noticed that too. She noticed the discipline in the movement, the way his jaw tightened while his eyes stayed level. "Let me see it," Grant said, reaching out. Marcus stepped back half a foot. Not enough to threaten, just enough to draw a line. "No." A small sound moved through the circle, a rich kind of shock, as if refusing Grant Vale was worse than stealing from him. Claire set her champagne glass down. "Mr. Reed," she said colder than she meant to sound, "if that watch belongs to someone in this family, this becomes a different conversation." Marcus looked at her then. Not angry, not pleading. "It already is." The words made her pause. Grant laughed once. "Convenient." He turned to the guard. "Check the serial number." The guard took a step forward, but the elderly woman on the bench lifted her trembling hand. "He helped me." Her voice was thin, nearly swallowed by the music. No one else did. For 1 second, the circle had no answer. Marcus did not look at her for gratitude. He looked at her ankle, saw the swelling rising above the pearl strap of her shoe, and said, "She needs ice and someone to keep her foot elevated." The calmness of it unsettled Claire more than any argument could have. He was being accused in front of donors, blocked from calling his child, and still watching the one person in pain. Claire's eyes dropped again to the watch. This time, the garden lights caught the underside of the case as Marcus adjusted his sleeve. The engraving flashed against the worn steel. "E.W. Return alive." Claire's breath changed before her face did. She knew her father's initials. Everyone at Whitmore Estate knew them. But the phrase was too strange, too intimate, too specific to belong on a random watch. Grant saw her see it. His expression tightened. "Engravings can be faked," he said quickly. Too quickly. Claire looked at him. "I didn't say anything." That silenced him for half a beat. Marcus heard the phone buzz again in his pocket. Mrs. Alvarez. Then a second buzz, shorter. His supervisor. The whole life he had worked so hard to keep steady was vibrating against his leg while strangers debated whether he was a thief. Claire's hand hovered near the watch, then stopped before touching him. "Where did you get it?" she asked. Marcus swallowed once. The answer was simple. The cost was not. If he said too much, an old door would open, and Lily's name might fall through it. If he said too little, Grant would use the silence like rope. From a man who was bleeding, Marcus said. The music seemed to thin around them. He told me to keep time until he could stand again. The elderly woman stared at him. Claire's guarded face cracked just enough for doubt to enter. Grant recovered first. That is exactly the kind of story a man tells after someone notices stolen property. He snapped his fingers toward security. Take the watch until we verify it. Marcus's hand closed over the cracked glass, not to keep wealth, but to protect a memory he had never spent. Claire lifted one hand, stopping the guard. Wait. For the first time all night, Grant looked truly irritated. The pause lasted only a second, but in that second the camera above the veranda blinked red, the guard's tablet chimed, and a locked file appeared under the delivery notice with 2 words that made Claire's eyes narrow. Whitmore incident. For one fragile second, it looked like the room might finally slow down long enough to see Marcus read clearly. Claire's raised hand held security in place. The guard's tablet glowed between them, the locked file name still visible beneath the delivery notice. Whitmore incident. Even Grant Vale stopped smiling for the length of one breath. The elderly woman on the bench exhaled as if mercy had entered the lawn. Then the tablet chirped again. Access denied. A red banner slid across the screen, followed by a second alert from the Foundation's internal system. Unauthorized courier flag for asset review. Grant looked almost relieved. There it is, he said. The system agrees. Marcus did not move. His fingers stayed around the cracked watch, feeling the raised edge of the engraving beneath his thumb. E.W. Return alive. Claire stared at the denial message, then at Grant. Why would a delivery notice trigger asset review? Because someone is wearing an asset that may belong to this family, Grant said smoothly. He held out his hand toward Marcus. The watch, Mr. Reed. Put it in the evidence pouch, and this can remain civil. Marcus's phone buzzed again, longer this time. He finally glanced down. Mrs. Alvarez had sent 3 words that cut through the champagne, the violin music, and the rich laughter trying to return at the edges of the crowd. Lily is waiting. Behind that message sat another one from his supervisor. Route reassigned if signature not complete in 5 minutes. The pharmacy bill, the medicine, the daughter who had told him to come home the same man. All of it pressed against his ribs harder than Grant's accusation. Claire saw the child's name. Something passed across her face, small and unwelcome. But Grant stepped between that look and what it might have become. You see the pattern, Claire? A sob story, a valuable watch, a sealed envelope, and now a sick child waiting somewhere. This is how people get into families like ours. Marcus looked at him then. The guests leaned closer, hungry for a reaction. They did not get one. My daughter is not a story, Marcus said. The sentence was quiet enough that the front row had to stop breathing to hear it. Claire's eyes dropped. Grant's jaw tightened. Then protect her, Grant said, lowering his voice so only Marcus, Claire, and the guard could hear. Leave the watch. Leave the envelope. Walk out before I call this what it looks like. The false kindness in the offer was colder than the insult. Marcus could leave and maybe still make Lily's medicine. He could hand over the watch and let them bury whatever old truth had made Edward Whitmore freeze. He could choose the safe door. But the elderly woman still sat unattended behind the circle, her ankle swelling. The locked file still sat under his delivery notice. And Claire, for all her polished doubt, had just seen enough to know the system was moving too fast. Marcus lifted the envelope. I came for a signature, he said. Not permission to be honest. Grant's face hardened. He snapped his fingers, and the guard opened a clear plastic evidence pouch. Then we do this formally. Claire started to speak, but her phone lit up with a message from the Foundation board. Do not engage. Route him through legal. Her thumb froze over the screen. Marcus watched her read it. He watched the courage almost arrive, then get trapped behind procedure. The guard stepped forward. The pouch opened with a dry plastic crackle, and Grant placed a single-page statement on the table beside the champagne glasses. Sign this, he said, and we'll consider your daughter's file in the morning. Marcus looked at the paper, then at the watch, then at Claire's silent face. For the first time that night, the choice became clear. They were not asking for the truth. They were asking him to trade it. Grant did not slide the statement toward Marcus. He placed it flat on the table and held 2 fingers on the top edge, like a man pinning down something alive. The page was only 1 paragraph, but Marcus saw the words that mattered before he read the rest. Unauthorized entry. Misunderstanding. Voluntary surrender of property. The clear evidence pouch hung open in the guard's hand, waiting for the cracked military watch as if the decision had already been made. "Sign it," Grant said, his voice low enough to sound generous. "Leave quietly, and tomorrow someone at the foundation may review Lily's case." Marcus looked at the paper, then at the dark screen of his phone. Mrs. Alvarez had called again. The missed call sat there beside Lily's name like a small wound. Across the lawn, the elderly woman pressed a napkin to her swollen ankle while guests pretended not to stare. Claire stood beside the table, her fingers still around her own phone, the board's order glowing against her palm. "Do not engage. Route him through legal." She was used to rooms where procedure protected people. Tonight, procedure looked too much like a locked door. "Grant," she said quietly, "we don't use medical files as leverage." His smile did not reach his eyes. "We use facts." Mr. Reed brought his child into this by displaying her situation. Marcus's jaw tightened once. Only once. "No," he said. "You did that." A few guests shifted. Grant's expression sharpened, pleased to have found heat under Marcus's calm. "Careful. Every word now goes in the report." He pointed toward the watch without touching it. A courier wearing a Whitmore heirloom, carrying a sealed envelope, refusing verification, and making emotional claims about a sick child. "Tell me how that looks." Marcus could have told him how it looked to a man who had slept in hospital chairs, counted pills under bad kitchen light, and still showed up to work because love did not pay invoices by itself. He could have opened an old wound right there on the linen table. He did not. He reached into his pocket instead and pulled out Lily's folded note. Purple markers showed through the paper. "Come home the same man." He read it without unfolding it, because he already knew every crooked letter. Then he slipped it back. "I won't sign a lie to buy mercy," he said. Claire's hand stopped over the legal message. For a second, she looked less like the daughter of a billionaire and more like a woman watching a rule she had trusted become a weapon. Grant saw the hesitation and moved fast. "Then surrender the watch while we investigate." The guard stepped closer. Marcus turned his wrist slightly, and the cracked glass caught the lights again. That small flash pulled Claire's eyes to the engraving. "E.W. Return alive." It also pulled the attention of the camera above the veranda, its red dot blinking steadily over the whole scene. Marcus noticed the angle. So did Grant. The difference was that Grant looked afraid for half a second. "Camera feed is private," Grant said quickly. "No one reviews estate footage without authorization." Claire looked at him. "Why would you say that before anyone asked?" The lawn went still. Marcus heard Lily's ringtone begin again, soft and bright inside his pocket. This time he answered. "Baby, I'm here," he said, voice low, steady, breaking only around the edges. Lily's small voice came through the speaker before he could turn it down. "Dad, did you forget my medicine?" The question moved through the rich crowd more brutally than any accusation. Marcus closed his eyes. "Never." Grant leaned close. "Then choose her. Sign and go." Marcus looked at the statement, the pouch, the watch, Claire's guilty silence, and the injured woman no one had helped until a poor man crossed the lawn. Then he folded the paper once and set it back on the table and signed. "My daughter needs medicine," he said, "but she also needs a father who doesn't teach her fear is the price of being believed." Claire inhaled sharply. The guard reached for Marcus's wrist. At that exact moment, the tablet in his other hand chimed again. The denied file flickered, unlocked for less than a second, and beneath the words Whitmore incident appeared one archived line. "Emergency extraction witness pending." Grant's face went pale, and the camera above them blinked from red to green. For less than 1 second, the truth almost breathed. The guard's tablet flickered in his hand, and the archived line beneath Whitmore incident appeared clearly enough for Claire to read it before the screen dimmed again. "Emergency extraction witness pending." Her eyes lifted to Marcus, then to the watch, then to Grant. The lawn changed temperature. Even the guests who had been enjoying the humiliation felt something slip out of their control. Marcus did not reach for the tablet. He did not say, "I told you." He only stood there with Lily's call still warm against his palm, the old watch exposed under the string lights, and the unsigned life folded on the table between champagne glasses. "Open it again," Claire said. Her voice was low, but the command inside it was real. The guard tapped the screen. "Access denied." Grant exhaled too loudly, like a man pretending relief was patience. "Archive files glitch all the time," he said, "especially when unauthorized devices are connected to the estate network." He looked at Marcus's cracked phone. Maybe Mr. Reed brought more than an envelope tonight. The accusation landed exactly where Grant wanted it to. The crowd turned from doubt back toward suspicion, hungry for a simpler story. Poor courier. Expensive watch. Locked file. Sick child. Now a possible breach. Marcus felt the old machinery of judgment close around him, gear by gear. Claire stepped toward the tablet, but her phone rang before she could speak. This time it was Foundation legal. She listened for 5 seconds, and the blood slowly left her face. "They're saying the delivery route was never approved," she whispered. Grant's mouth softened into victory. Then he entered under false credentials. Marcus looked down at the sealed envelope beneath his hand. He could tear it open. He could force them to see what he had carried across town. But that would make him exactly what Grant needed him to be, a man breaking rules in front of witnesses. So Marcus lifted the envelope and placed it gently on the table, unopened. "Then call the sender," he said. "Not the lawyer. Not him. The sender." Grant snapped his fingers. "Security." The guard reached again, and this time his hand closed around Marcus's wrist. Lily's voice came faintly from the phone. "Dad." Marcus turned the speaker off before she could hear the crowd. That hurt more than the grip. Claire saw him do it. She saw a father protecting his daughter from a room that had already bruised him. But she still stood between instinct and procedure, too late to stop what her silence had allowed. The guard took the watch. The strap resisted for a moment, worn leather pulling against Marcus's skin, then it came free. The cracked face hit the evidence pouch with a dull plastic sound. Something in Marcus's expression moved, almost invisible, but Claire caught it. Not anger. Grief. Grant leaned closer. "You should have signed." Marcus looked at the pouch, then at the folded note in his pocket. "Come home the same man." "No," he said quietly. "I should have left the first time people showed me who they were." The words did not sound like surrender. They sounded like a man choosing not to become ugly just because ugliness had surrounded him. Security began guiding him toward the service path. Guests parted as if dignity were contagious. At the edge of the lawn, the elderly woman struggled to stand, but Marcus shook his head once, telling her not to hurt herself for him. Claire finally moved. "Wait." Grant touched her sleeve, smiling for the guests. "Let legal handle it." She looked at his hand, then at the evidence pouch in the guard's fist. Inside it, the watch had turned face down. On the back, under the glare of the garden lights, the engraving was fully visible for the first time. E.W. Return alive. Emer 11 marca. Claire stopped breathing. Marcus had never told them what the initials after the date meant. Grant had never noticed them, but Edward Whitmore had. From the veranda, his cane struck the stone once, hard enough to cut through the music. The old billionaire was staring at the pouch like a man seeing the night he almost died rise from the dead. The tablet in the guard's hand chimed once, soft, almost polite, before the entire Whitmore estate system froze. The screen flashed white, then black. Then a single line appeared beneath the delivery record like a wound reopening after years of silence. Whitmore incident. Emergency extraction witness. Confirmed. For a half second, no one moved. Not Claire. Not the security guard. Not even Grant Vale, whose expression finally stopped performing confidence and started showing something closer to fear. Marcus Reed stood still in the center of the lawn, the evidence pouch half open in the guard's grip, the cracked military watch still inside it like an accusation that had just learned how to speak. The garden lights above them felt suddenly too bright, too exposed, as if the entire estate had been asked to stand trial. That file is restricted. Grant snapped, too fast, too sharp. It's corrupted metadata. This is manipulation. No, Edward Whitmore's voice cut through him without raising volume. It did not need to. The cane struck the stone once. Final, absolute, and every sound in the garden seemed to fall behind it. It is not corrupted. Edward stepped off the veranda slowly, each movement heavier than the last, as if he were walking back into a memory he had spent years trying to bury. His eyes were not on Grant, not on the guests. They were on Marcus, on the watch, on the man everyone had just tried to reduce to a courier. Claire's breath caught as she looked between them. Grandfather. Edward did not answer her. He stopped in front of the guard and held out his hand. The guard hesitated only once before placing the evidence pouch into his palm. Edward opened it himself. The plastic crackled loudly in the silence. He turned the watch over. The cracked glass caught the lights. The engraving beneath, it was no longer just visible. It was undeniable. E.W. Return alive. M.R. 11 Marca. Edward's fingers tightened slightly around the watch. Not like a man holding property, but like a man holding the last proof that he had once deserved to survive. 9 years ago, he said, voice lower now, not for the crowd, but for Marcus alone, my helicopter went down outside Montauk Ridge during a storm blackout. No Viacon, no radio, no confirmation of survival. A pause, heavy enough to break pride. The official report said extraction took 46 minutes. His eyes lifted. That report was a lie. A murmur moved through the guests, quickly dying when Edward looked up again. I was alive at minute 12. Claire's hand went to her mouth without permission. Grant took a step back, but there was nowhere for his authority to go anymore. Edward continued, each word now cutting deeper into the present than the past. I was pulled from burning wreckage by a combat medic who was not assigned to my evacuation zone. A man who was not supposed to be there. A man who stayed anyway. He turned slightly toward Marcus. That man refused compensation, refused recognition, refused everything except one thing. Edward held up the watch. This. Marcus didn't speak. He didn't need to. The weight of the room had already shifted away from accusation and toward realization. Edward's voice softened, but only slightly. He told me he had a daughter waiting at home. He said if I ever try to find him, I should not reward him. I should only make sure he could still come home to her. Claire's eyes flicked toward Marcus, then toward the invisible weight of Lily's name that had been hanging over this entire night. For the first time, she wasn't looking at him as a suspect. She was looking at him as something worse, someone they had failed to see correctly. Grant tried again, but weaker now. Even if that's true, he still bypassed procedure. Procedure? Edward finally turned on him. Not loudly, not angrily, just completely. That man carried a dying billionaire out of fire, while you people wrote reports about liability. Silence snapped into place like glass. Edward stepped closer to Marcus and placed the watch back into his hand himself. Not through security, not through policy, through recognition. You did not steal anything, Edward said quietly. You preserved what I almost lost. Marcus closed his fingers around the cracked glass. For the first time all night, his grip wasn't defensive. It was steady. Claire stepped forward slowly, her voice breaking through the silence for the first time without authority behind it. The file. Lily Reed's medical routing. I'll clear it tonight. Personally. Grant didn't respond. He couldn't. The system he had controlled had already moved past him. Edward turned slightly, addressing the entire estate now. Let this be understood, he said. This man was not under review tonight. A pause. We were. The words landed heavier than any accusation Marcus had faced all evening. One by one, guests lowered their gaze, not out of fear of him anymore, but out of discomfort at themselves. The music that had once defined the party never resumed. Edward looked back at Marcus one last time. You kept your promise to your daughter, he said, even when no one else kept theirs to you. Marcus finally spoke, voice low, controlled, unchanged. She's still waiting for her medicine. Edward nodded once. Then she won't wait alone. And for the first time since Marcus stepped through the gates, The estate did something it had not done all night. It stopped deciding who he was. Marcus Reed stood at the edge of the Whitmore estate gate, without moving for several seconds after the words were spoken behind him. This man saved my life. Edward Whitmore's voice still hung in the air like a judgment no one could appeal. The garden behind him had not recovered. Silence had replaced music. Shock had replaced laughter. And the same people who had mocked him minutes earlier now avoided looking at him entirely, as if eye contact might force them to acknowledge what they had just done. Marcus did not turn back, not because he was afraid to face them, but because there was nothing left in that room he needed from them anymore. Inside the estate, Claire Whitmore stood frozen near the broken statement on the table, her fingers still hovering over the space where authority used to feel clean and predictable. Grant Vale had stopped speaking completely, not because he was convinced, but because there was no argument left that could survive Edward's presence. Edward stepped forward one last time, his hand still resting on the cracked military watch before he placed it back into Marcus's palm himself. Not through security, not through policy, through recognition. You carried me out of fire when my name meant nothing to you, Edward said quietly. Tonight, they try to make your name mean nothing to everyone. A pause. That ends now. Marcus closed his fingers around the watch. For a moment, his expression did not change. But the weight of it did. Not heavier, not lighter, just finally understood. Claire stepped forward slowly, breaking through the silence that had held her all night. Lily's treatment is already cleared, she said. Emergency approval went through 10 minutes ago. It's being processed directly through the hospital network. Marcus nodded once. No celebración. No relief performance. Just acknowledgement that something important had finally been corrected without needing to be fought for in the wrong way. Edward looked at him carefully. You never asked for payment, he said. Marcus shook his head slightly. That was never the point. That answer did not sound noble. It sounded final. Grant Vale finally spoke, but his voice no longer carried the room. Even if this story is true, procedure still matters. Edward turned his head slowly toward him. Procedure is what almost let a man die in that helicopter 9 years ago after 12 minutes of survival. Grant said nothing after that. The system he believed in had stopped responding to him. Claire looked at Marcus again, but this time not as a CEO or daughter of power, but as someone who had misunderstood the cost of the man standing in front of her. I can't undo how tonight started, she said, but I can decide how it continues. Marcus met her eyes briefly, then decide better than tonight. It was not forgiveness. It was not acceptance. It was instruction. Marcus turned fully toward the gate this time. As he walked away, the estate lights behind him no longer felt like judgment. They felt like distance. Inside his pocket, his phone vibrated once. Mrs. Alvarez, she's stable. Medicine working. Lily is asking when you'll be home. Marcus stopped just long enough to read it twice. Then he looked down at the cracked watch in his hand. EW. Return alive. He closed his fingers around it and finally exhaled fully for the first time all night. Behind him, the Whitmore estate did not return to what it was before. It could not, because everyone inside it now understood something they could not unsee. The man they had tried to define in seconds had already been defined by a lifetime of choices none of them had earned the right to judge. And Marcus Reed kept walking home, not as the man they mocked, not as the man they saved, but as the man who never stopped being exactly who he was.